Total War Warhammer, the latest in the series, has come out, and I've played 90 turns as the Empire faction on Legendary difficulty and 59 turns as the Greenskins. So here's what I think about it. Just a note here, I'm not someone to excuse Creative Assembly when they do scummy things or when they make a crappy game. Far from it. I've criticized them time and time again on this channel for the things they've done as a company, for the things they wanted to do before they backpedaled on with regards to Total War Warhammer. For instance, Chaos Warriors, they want DLC, they changed that to free for the first week. The idea of no modding support, and well, I've criticized them for Blood as well, for the Blood pack, though they haven't changed course on that. There is a mild Blood rating for the game, but it's there, as far as I understand it, because of blood on weapons and blood in certain things, but there's no blood in combat. Anyway, to talk about the game itself, to talk about the gameplay of it all, I'll start with battles, performance, how they handle all of that stuff. Performance-wise, they've moved to X64 versus X32, and the performance increase is pretty big compared to previous titles in the series. Not that that's anything to really write home about when you're comparing them to previous titles in the series, because previous titles in the series ran like absolute piss. You'd get into the single digits in terms of frame rate in large-scale battles. Here you don't. You get better multi-core support, you do have X64, and you will have DirectX 12 eventually. For now, however, you will get to about 30 FPS on an i7 3770K, 16 gigs of DDR3 and GTX 980, that's my computer. You will get to 30 FPS, give or take, generally 40, 50 FPS in large scale battles, 20v20 battles. That's the frame rate I'm seeing, and that's the best the series has seen in a long ass time, especially since Empire. It's the best performing game, the best in terms of optimization at the moment, and DirectX 12 is still not yet implemented. Keep in mind, I'm running on an NVIDIA card, and this is an AMD game. It's going to be packaged, or is packaged with AMD cards, so it might run better on AMD cards, I don't know. Anyway, just something to mention here when it comes down to this particular title. Other stuff, when it comes to battles, well, I gotta say, they've improved things in battles. They've removed the, most importantly, just the one thing that might be a reason why performance is better, but did certainly improve the spectacle of battles, is they removed the ridiculous kill sync animations, they added collision detection, they added mass to units. Kill sync animations, what I mean is that in every game since Empire, including Rome 2 and Attila, though they kind of change things around in those, but what would happen is that when two units of soldiers collide, individual soldiers within those units would seek each other out and get locked in a kill sync animation, and and they would not engage other soldiers. They did change it for Rome 2 and Attila, with patch for Rome 2 and Attila from the start, due to the backlash Rome 2 got, because it just made the whole thing a goddamn mess. They also added in collision detection to units. Now, that's not quite in mass to units. Now, it's not quite on the same level of, say, Medieval 2 or Rome, where in a battle in Medieval 2, when a unit engaged another, they would push them significantly back, actually, throughout their one-on-one engagement. And the formation within that unit would break, the soldiers would be scattered around. It doesn't happen here. It happens to a very, very small degree, barely noticeable. It kind of happens a bit, but really not significant enough. That's that's just something to mention here on this particular subject. Battles are still fast, by the way, but AI has been improved significantly. It will move its ranged units out of the way. It will do a good job of trying to keep its ranged cavalry. In particular, it's an annoying bitch to actually deal with the ranged cavalry of the AI, which is good. That's kind of the purpose. They're skirmishers. That's their purpose, to annoy you, as it were. Obviously, you can catch them up. You can do some things to catch them up, but that's something to mention. The one aspect where the AI falls flat on its face is when you have an army reinforcing the AI, and you engage the AI early on in the battle, the reinforcement army, instead of the AI pulling back or the AI synchronizing well with the reinforcement army, they'll send units in waves against you from the reinforcement army, and that allows you to chop them to bits. So that's a problem with the game, as it were. Heroes are very powerful, by the way. Hero combat is quite interesting. They did away with all those 1v1 animations, as I said, but it's still nice to see someone like Karl Franz or Grimgor Ironhide jump into the fray and decapitate people, as it were. Well, no actual decapitations because there's no blood, there's no animations for that, but you get the point. Jump into the fray, people fly. Cavalry, charges and cavalry have actual impact, so that's good. But there is a problem with all of this. I do feel they did a fairly good job when it comes to balancing magic, balancing the hero characters, although I kind of feel it's very difficult. Like, what you're gonna do in battles, what you're gonna end up doing with their generals in particular, the problem is it's very difficult to kill hero units in generals with regular units. You will just have a very, very difficult time doing any damage with regular units to them. So what you're gonna have to do with your own hero is snipe their leaders, or you're gonna be stuck in a battle. And I played this on Legendary. I've played both my campaigns of Greenskins and Empire on Legendary. What happens is, due to the high morale, you're gonna be stuck in a bloodbath. So if you can't snipe the enemy general, then which you can't do with certain leaders like Balthazar Gelt, then you're gonna have a problem on your hands. There are certain heroes which are good for this, but regular units have a very difficult time dealing with them. So maybe some balance issues there on that particular front, but otherwise mostly fine. Though it's got to be said, when it comes to the balancing, the stat bonuses are fine, and in previous Total War games the morale bonus was also fine, but it's not quite fine here just because of the way the various factions work. So for instance, dwarves have insane morale just to begin with. You add the legendary morale, legendary difficulty morale on top of that, and they're virtually unbreakable in battle, and they'll fight until the bitter fucking end, and that's a problem. I do see that as a bloody problem. I do see that as bad balancing, and I do see that as bad design on their level. But don't expect Creative Assembly to do a good job when it comes to balancing difficulty levels. But the battles are fine in terms of spectacle, in terms of mechanics. Where they fall flat on their face is battles are decided far less by your actual tactics in them, and far more by the setup of your army, the terrain you're fighting on, that you end up fighting on in the campaign, what actions you've taken with your agents before the battle. So battles, you go into a battle in the campaign, you know you're gonna win or lose the vast majority of times before you go in there. And what's the point? You know, what's this damn point in doing that battle with that? Yes, it's a nice spectacle, but the tactics themselves aren't really anything to write home about. Take an infantry line with ranged units behind it, so 2 lines, artillery 3rd line, right? Maybe you have a 2nd infantry line of reserves if you want that. Halberdier spearmen on the side to deal with any cavalry attacks, and then you have cavalry on the side of the spearmen, all that, to launch your own attacks. Heroes in the center, all that. Take that formation, you will win 90% of battles. Really, it's that simple. It's the best siding formation that there is available right there. There are certainly situations where an unorthodox formation is called for, where it works, but most of the time you just take an infantry line, a ranged line, an artillery line with cavalry on the side, spearmen obviously screening your force and all that, and you will win the vast majority of battles. That's just simply how the whole situation goes, and that leaves a lot to be desired. They're probably the best battles I've seen in a Total War game in years, really, but just the way they worked on a tactical level, the way the morale works, the balancing works, and all that, in terms of morale, that is balancing in terms of morale, especially on Legendary, just leaves stuff to be desired. Anyway, this brings me up to another point, the campaign. So on a campaign level, the battles have good things going for them. They're improved. The performance is improved, but the campaign is still pretty fucking bad. Pray if I can bet. Auto-resolve, for instance, has been improved. So there's even less point in going into battles because for most part, the auto-resolve outcome is a fair outcome. You'll win or lose in auto-resolve as you would in the battle. In fact, in some cases, siege battles in particular, you'll do better with auto-resolve in terms of taking casualties than you would by actually fighting the battle yourself. So there's quite a few issues. The only real major issue I see though with auto-resolve lies in the fact that with certain units like agents or artillery or low HP units or units that have taken damage. Let's say, for instance, you have cavalry unit, it's an elite unit, it's taken some damage, it's lost some soldiers. You take that, you throw it in a battle, when it's low on men, it will probably die because the auto-resolve doesn't take into consideration that if you were to fight this battle, you try and protect that unit, try and not engage it. And that's an issue. Because of that, you end up fighting battles that you would win absolutely for certain, but you end up fighting them just to preserve specific units within your army or specific agents. Agents can be removed from the battle if you so desire, so that's not too big of an issue, but it is an issue with units that you want to keep alive or units you don't want to take too much damage because they're difficult to replace. That's one problem. But here we get into the real issues. The campaign is shit. That's simply how it is. The campaign, especially on Legendary, is a bloody piece of shit. There's no way of putting it nicely, and I'm not gonna pander to Creative Assembly. There's plenty of YouTubers that do that. I'm not one of them. The campaign on Legendary has a metric ton of issues. From the diplomacy is nonsensical to begin with. I don't know what causes a faction to like me or dislike me for all the things that they show me. The one thing I do understand is that you do get a debuff modifier when you're playing on a higher difficulty, or if you become too powerful, you do get a modifier when it comes to diplomacy that makes it harder to actually achieve it. Beyond that, the way the AI acts towards you is very difficult to really grasp here. It's a random chance nonsense. In fact, it's so random, it's so crap that, say for instance you end the turn, the AI in an AI faction declares war on you. Reload your save before the end turn and just talk with that faction, try and get something going, whatever that is, say a non-aggression agreement, trade agreement, defensive alliance, whatever. And chances are, in a lot of cases, the AI faction that really, really hates you, they will not declare war on you as they would have originally. The system is bollocks. And when it comes to war, for a series called Total War, it does a piss poor job of representing war. I hate to mention this because the game I'm about to give an example from is not really a good game. But in Stellaris, for instance, when you go to war, you set the war goal. You have a goal before you begin a war, and you can occupy planets, but unless you set that as your war goal and you negotiate stuff, you can just gain half an empire because you want to. You can only gain a small portion of it, and that's how a real war goes down. This is not just an issue with Warhammer, it's an issue with every game. Now obviously in Warhammer people are not gonna play diplomatic unless you're talking about very specific things like an empire civil war, right? Or human faction versus human faction. That's where you would see something like that. But against let's say between greenskins and the Empire, of course the greenskins are not going to stop and they're going to fight until the bitter end, and the Empire is going to fight until the bitter end. The fact that there's even diplomacy with the greenskins is laughable. Really. The only change that makes is that it's more difficult to achieve diplomatic deals as the greenskins with non-greenskin factions. But it's still pretty fucking stupid to be able to convince a dwarf to fight by your side in a war against your fellow greenskins. And you can't do that. The system is bollocks on a diplomatic level. On a base building level, limited slots again, because they sure as shit love their limited slots. And one of the things they introduced in actually Rome 2, they introduced buildings that would give you minus public order. In Attila, what they introduced on Legendary is that you lose public order if you're playing on a high difficulty. So on Legendary, you lose -8 public order regardless of what you do. And that just makes the whole thing fucking tedious and infuriating to deal with. It's infuriating, it's frustrating, it's boring, it adds nothing in terms of challenge. It's not... If the idea, Creative Assembly, is to prevent the player from steamrolling factions by getting too powerful, by not having anything to stop him or her, then that's a piss poor way of doing it. Why? Because it doesn't matter in the mid and late game. It only matters in the early game, and makes it so goddamn fucking infuriating to deal with the early game on legendary difficulty. Certainly you can play Chaos Warriors if you want to as the Horde, and you don't have to deal with that nonsense if you so desire. But as the regular factions, the non-DLC factions, you will have to deal with that if you're playing on a high enough difficulty. And the problem is, if you got used to playing on that difficulty in, say, Rome 2, in Shogun 2 and all that, if you got used to playing on that difficulty, then going to a difficulty lower than that means that you'll just steamroll, because the developers have no goddamn clue and just found a very cheap solution which does not work. If the intent is to prevent people from steamrolling, then find a way to prevent exploits, because that's what people do. They exploit the diplomacy system, they exploit the campaign AI, they exploit the economy, they exploit things. Design a better fucking game. Don't put stupid debuffs in diplomacy, debuffs in public order, random events that screw you over. Oh, or if you create a confederation, your public order and your diplomatic standing with similar factions as yours is also hurt for a number of turns. Debuffs after debuffs after debuffs as a cheap, pathetic way to try and fix an issue in terms of the campaign, which is that players like me who know how to play, who know how to build an empire, who know all the tricks and exploits in the series, will steamroll through the AI. Mods for Total War Medieval 2, what they did was created garrison scripts. What? So there would be a AI army spawning out of nowhere. Now, people hated that when Creative Assembly did it, and rightly so, because it's a stupid method. It's not really a good solution, it's a cheap one. But, you know, not only do you have all these debuffs, but AI has a stronger economy, doesn't have to deal with any public order negatives, has more recruitment slots, doesn't have the upkeep issues that you do have. Good luck getting an AI province to rebel. You'll be dealing with rebellion after rebellion. It's just so sodding tedious. That's what the campaign is. It's tedious and really detracts from the good point of this game, which are the battles, the better point at any rate, which are the battles, which are enjoyable in their own right. If you get a good battle, it's enjoyable. But the campaign works against that. Works against that so many levels. So the unique battles are the quest battles, right? But in order to get a lot of them, you have to do nonsensical crap like, oh, send your army across half the map to defeat 5 greenskin armies. And suddenly, because all the orcs near me as the Empire were defeated, I had to march across the sodding map all the way to the south, where the orcs start, and defeat the actual greenskin faction 5 times in order to trigger an important quest battle, the Battle of Blackfire Pass. That's just so stupid. It's like the campaign team is doing everything it can to prevent enjoyable, solid, large-scale battles. You are limited in your army size, because if you have too many armies, your upkeep shoots through the roof. Not because of the units you have in those armies, but because having multiple armies screws your upkeep. So people don't have huge armies. They have 1, 2, 3 armies. Even maintaining 2 armies as 2 full armies, or early mid-game, is a challenge in itself. Hell, as it were. It's just fucking frustrating. Instead of having this is Warhammer. This is the realm of huge scale battles, and the developers do everything can to limit you on that level. You can't have large scale battles, epic large scale battles on your hands, because you're stuck chasing quest battles around the map, and you're stuck with limited armies in a huge ass map because of the stupidity when it comes to the economy in the campaign. It's frustrating, it's boring, it detracts from the overall experience. So in conclusion, is it worth getting? Well, you might be surprised to know that it's perhaps the best Total War in a long time. All those issues that I just talked about, they've been there from previous games. And the developers apparently have no intention of fixing these issues. You don't prevent the player from snowballing, by the way. You just make the early game unbearable, but once you deal with that early game, it's pathetically easy. You will still snowball through the enemy. And what happens in the mid-late game? Oh, Chaos comes with their infinite armies. God. Anyway, Creative Assembly once again screws over battles. This is not new. They once again screw over battles with piss poor campaign design. It's piss poor. There's no real improvements from, say, Attila, for instance. And like in Attila, say Age of Charlemagne, where I had to build churches in every goddamn region, in every goddamn province to keep people happy, I have to do the exact same shit in this one. And literally, that's just infuriating. It's a waste of fucking time. If that's the only way you can make it so you can pad out the length to make it longer than it should be, then maybe you should go back to the drawing board and reconsider sodding design on the game. Because as it stands, it's bad. It really is bad. So, is it worth it? Full price? Fuck no. It's not worth it full price. Get it at the discount. There are people who are selling it at the discount right now. Green Man Gaming, Kingwin, Games Planet, all that stuff. You can get it, but don't buy it at full price. That's a stupid idea, as it were. So that's kind of all I had to say on this subject. Costin here on Serious Gaming signing out. Don't forget to subscribe and like the video. And stay tuned for more because I will continue. Because I'm fucked in the head. Even though I find this whole thing frustrating, annoying. It's still Warhammer. It's still a Warhammer game, a Total War Warhammer game, which is a concept people have asked for a long time. It's one of the very few Warhammer fantasy battle games, and then as someone who gives a real fuck about Warhammer and Warhammer fantasy battles and has wanted a game like that, you know, I'm interested in playing it. I want to get Archeon. I want to get Grimgor Ironhide to knock Archeon on his fucking ass as Grimgor did in Storm of Chaos. That needs to happen. The sad aspect, though, is that it's the Total War gameplay in itself, the campaign at least, mediocre as fuck. That's what it is. And if they continue down this path with future games that are not, say, Warhammer based, or have that kind of thing going for them, they're gonna be mediocre as well, and they're gonna be boring as fuck. Attila was the worst selling game for a reason, and it wasn't just because Rome 2 pissed off a lot of people, even though Rome 2 did piss off a tremendous amount of people and turned off a lot of people from the series. But it wasn't just that. It's because Attila, for all the problems that I just mentioned, are from Attila. All the issues I have on the campaign level are from Attila. Costin here, signing out.